Welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host. I'm Pastor Chris. Thank you very much for joining me today. The podcast is a way to help you get to know some of the people at Shepherd of the Hills and to be able to learn from their experiences and expertise. We have a lot of great people here at our church, school, and childcare, and I'd like for you to become better acquainted with them. Today, my guest is a member of our church. Her name is Anita Eggert. She serves on our board of directors. She's been at the church about as long as I've been here. We came around the same time. And Anita has some great thoughts and ideas and experience when it comes to investing. And so we're going to get onto that topic and also just get to know her better as a member of our church. And so now I'd like to welcome Anita Eggert. Anita, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And I said you've been here about as long as I've been here, which is 2008, 2009-ish, about that long.
I started coming here in the fall of 2008 and officially joined in 2009.
Okay. And then since that time, you've joined our board of directors, so you get to be a part of decisions that are made and how things work behind the scenes in the church. So have you learned anything or gained any new insights about the church from sitting on the board of directors?
Yes, I think we have a lot of well-qualified people in this congregation to help us.
Yeah, we do a lot of really smart, experienced people from all different walks of life, so we're able to draw on that. So tell us a little more about you, your background first of all, and then we'll get into our topic of investing. But a little more about you so people can get to know you better. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Milwaukee at the county hospital. A little story about that. My parents were on welfare because it was the end of the Depression, and my dad was working for WPA, and they were living with my grandparents. So I didn't start out at the top of the ladder.
Yeah, sure.
And my parents were divorced when I was 12, and my mother remarried when I was 15. And I have been going to church since I was 4 years old. My mother was a Sunday school teacher.
Okay.
And I was brought up in the United Church of Christ. It was the Evangelical and Reformed Church when I was baptized there.
Okay.
And so I was baptized, confirmed, married, and my children were all baptized in the United Church of Christ.
United Church of Christ. Okay.
And in my career, I went into nursing school when I was 17 years old, and I was an RN by the time I was 20.
Okay.
And I worked a year, lived at home, and got married, and went back to school and got a bachelor's degree. And in that day, very few nurses had bachelor's degree, but I said I saw the handwriting on the wall, and the future nurses were going to need a bachelor's degree, and I said, let's get it over with before we have a family.
Okay.
And I worked in nursing until 2001. And I held all different kinds of positions in nursing, from staff nurse to administration.
Uh-huh. What were some of the biggest challenges of being a nurse?
I think there's a lot of stress involved. You see a lot of things that aren't very pleasant.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with a lot of different stressful things that happen. You get admissions and someone else is going critical at the same time. So,
yes. Having to juggle a lot of important things at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the greatest joys of being a nurse?
To see your patients thrive and get well and know that you made a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said you were a nurse in one capacity or another until about 2001?
Yes.
And what happened after that for you?
I retired.
And what did you do with yourself in retirement?
I got busier.
Yeah? Is that how it works?
Yeah, That's how it works.
Yeah?
Yeah, I got, one of my doctors said, oh, you're going to retire, you're going to be busier than you were when you worked.
Right?
And I've been busy. I do volunteer work. I've been on different boards and committees and different organizations. And I'm the volunteer coordinator. Well, I'm a volunteer at CAM, and I represent our church for CAM.
Right.
So I go to their quarterly meetings.
Okay.
And I've been at that since 2007.
Mm-hmm. Seems like volunteering and civic engagement is important to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I enjoy it. I mean, I'm involved with LWML and sewing quilts. And,
yeah.
I was with the Historical Society in Leon Valley trying to restore the old Huebner Onion House.
Oh, really?
And was secretary of that organization. And I was chairman and president of various nursing organizations while I had my career.
Uh-huh.
So
what motivates you to serve on boards and committees?
I just like being involved and seeing change and helping where I can.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's talk about our topic for today. I know you have a lot of great thoughts, and I think that our audience is really going to get a lot out of our conversation on investing. Mm-hmm. And I thought perhaps we could start with just how did this become a topic of interest for you? How did you get into investing?
Well, it started with my stepfather.
Okay.
He, that week after he and my mother got married, he met me in the hallway one day and said, Anita, from here on out, you're going to have an allowance. And I'd never had an allowance before, but it taught me how to budget.
Okay.
And then one day he saw me again and said, Anita, you've got savings bonds that your parents have accumulated for you for birthdays or whatever. Yeah. He said, I think you need to sell those and put them in a savings and loan where you'd get better interest.
Okay.
And so, okay. And then I'd hear him talking on the phone to the broker. And of course, the broker kept calling him all the time, wanting to buy or sell. And finally, my dad got a little bit perturbed with that. And he got a different broker. But my parents never discussed finances with me.
Okay.
So anyway, I saw how my parents managed money, especially my stepfather. Mm-hmm. He didn't believe in using credit.
Okay.
If you didn't have the money to buy something, you waited until you did.
Okay.
And that became kind of our philosophy all through life.
Okay.
And it's a matter of deciding what are your needs and what are your wants.
Okay.
Do you need the item or do you just want it?
Okay.
And most of us don't get into the I can buy what I want until much later in life.
Sure.
And our first big investment, well, for me, was a car, but I worked a year, lived at home, and that I paid cash for my first used car.
Yeah.
And before my husband and I got married, we discussed finances, and we agreed that he would support the family and any of my income would be saved.
Okay.
Because I felt I wanted to stay home with the children while they were infants and small. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't depend on two incomes.
Sure.
If I was to stay home with the children. And
sure.
So we were able to accomplish both of those goals.
Okay, so you lived off his income, and whatever you brought in went into savings.
Right.
Okay.
And I worked part-time.
Uh-huh.
And that enabled us to buy our replace vehicles. It enabled us to take vacations. And,
sure.
If something broke down, you had the money to pay for it.
So that plan worked out for you?
It worked out very well.
Okay, great. Now, you told me later on in life, you came across an article, you came across a person's story that really inspired you.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little more about that?
Well, At the age of 55, I got divorced. And in a divorce, you lose at least half of your assets.
Yeah, right.
And I realized that I only had another 10 years to get my act together to be able to retire.
Okay.
And that was in 1994. And in 1996, I was reading The Bottom Line, and I was ripe for it. God sent this article to me. I really believe it.
Okay.
And it's a story about Ann Schreiber, and she's a real inspiration. She had $5,000, and in the middle of the Depression, she bought stock because stock outperforms all other types of investments over time.
Over time, okay.
The stock market will go up and down. And since 1929, it's gone up and down, up and down, up and down. But it's over all time, it's gone up.
Okay.
Yes, we have crashes periodically. But anyway, this lady made a wise decision. And I'll just read some excerpts from her article. When the economy, I told you she invested during the Depression. She kept herself informed by reading newspapers, magazines, and anything else that might help her pick a winning stock in a particular industry. Okay. When she died, she owned over 100 stocks.
Okay.
That's different companies.
Different kinds of
right.
stocks, okay.
I don't think there were any bad investments, said her broker. She only bought industry leaders that she thought would stand the test of time.
Uh-huh.
She bought a few stocks solely for their dividends, which she used for income, but mostly she bought companies that research told her would keep growing over the years. And she diversified her portfolio. And by diversification, that means she didn't have all her money in one sector of the market. She may have had money in technology. Well, they didn't have technology back then, but today it would be technology. It could be consumer goods, utilities, energy. Okay. There's probably 10 or 12 sectors of the market, okay, all told.
Okay.
She didn't care if a stock declined temporarily because she knew that these were strong companies and eventually they would come back. Most of her dividends in stock were used to buy more stock.
Okay.
And over time, the more she made in the market, the more important it became to seek relief from taxation. Because obviously when you sell stocks, you have to pay capital gains tax.
Oh, okay.
So she didn't want to be involved with that. So in later years, she took her investments and she was making $750,000 a year.
Wow.
She invested her cash flow in tax-exempt securities. And tax-exempt securities can be municipal bonds. That's the only one that I'm really aware of, but I'm sure there's others, and her broker no doubt helped her with that.
Uh-huh.
At the end of her life, she lived to be 101. Okay. She lived frugally, never married, in a small apartment, and her $5,000 had become $22 million.
Wow. And what year was that? Do you know?
She died in 1996.
Oh, that was the year she died that came out?
Yes, when her broker wrote the article.
Wow.
And she donated all of that money to a private religious school in New York.
Wow, that school did very well.
Yes. This article was an inspiration to me.
You've held on to it all these years.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was looking through a folder last night and I found it and I thought, oh, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Because it inspired me.
Really?
And at that time I said, I need to invest in the market.
Okay.
And that's what I did.
Okay, so you were 55, you were 10 years away from retirement, and you thought, it's not too late to get started.
You want to hear the better part of it?
Please.
I retired in 6 years.
Oh, okay. You accelerated your retirement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I even retired early.
Wow, fantastic. So can you tell us, let's say you're talking to someone that has no experience in investing, and you've told me investing is more than the stock market.
Right.
Where do you even start if you want to be an investor?
First, you have to realize that investing is about making your assets work for you.
Okay.
And what's your biggest asset? It's yourself.
Okay.
You have to plan to have a job that's going to give you a living wage.
Sure.
And then you look at your assets, and you have to learn how to handle them. And how do you learn about handling them? I've learned a lot reading various things. I subscribe to Bottom Line, I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and the local paper, and I always read the financial pages, the business section.
Okay.
And that's how you learn over time. People that have taught me to, I had at one point a financial advisor, and I had a course in college on personal finance. And that's where I want to tell you about the different kinds of things that you can invest in.
Okay.
You can invest in bonds, and the bonds go from, the best bond to buy is rated AAA. The worst bond you want is B or lower, or B or C.
Okay.
Why is it a AAA? Because it's less likely to default, and the company that's selling the bond is probably a lot stronger, and so you are going to get the earnings off your bond. And my first bond I bought was from a hospital that I worked with. They were going to do an expansion, and so we bought some bonds from the hospital, and then every quarter we'd clip the coupons and send them in, and then they'd send us our money.
Oh, really?
And then at the end of 5 years, the whole thing came due, and you got your money back.
Oh, okay.
So that was my experience with bonds.
Uh-huh.
And then another place, I worked at a hospital here that was not owned by a religious organization, but they were in the stock market. So I said, well, heck, let's buy some of their stock. And did that. And that stock, I don't remember what we paid for it back then. I thought it was expensive. It might have been $40 a share, but right now it's selling for over $400 a share.
Okay.
I don't own any of it anymore. Lost it in the divorce.
Oh, no.
But anyway, when I was working on my master's degree in nursing, our instructor, part of it, was on finances, and hospitals, it's big money place to work, and when you're in administration, you've got a departmental budget and so on. And anyway, she had an interest in the stock market, and she gave us a whole bunch of information about it, how to read an annual report from a company.
Okay. So it sounds like you have to have some time to invest.
Yes.
In being a good investor. You can't just do it a couple minutes a day. You really have to dedicate time to learn, to study, to determine what decisions you want to make.
Exactly.
It takes time, right?
It takes time. And like my son said, Mom, how do you know all of this? And I said, well, you don't learn it at all one day. You read every day.
Right.
And it's not that you become obsessed with it. You just, when you read the Wall Street Journal, it's not going to tell you buy this stock or buy that stock. You have to figure it out. Oh, this looks like it's a good company.
Right.
I'm going to watch it for a while. Then you buy it.
So you study it, just like you were preparing for your master's degree. You had to study in order to learn. Same thing here. You don't just flip a coin. you've got to really study and learn and be educated.
Yep. And I think someone quoted, I don't remember who said it, it was, do the best with what you have.
Sure.
And we really, we have a lot of things going for us, we just don't realize it sometimes.
Okay. So you talked about your biggest investment is yourself.
Right.
What are other investments that people may have that they don't even realize?
Oh, I guess I got digressed here. There's other investments besides bonds and stocks. Real estate.
Real estate, yeah.
Not everybody wants to buy a home, but a home is a big investment.
Right.
There's pitfalls with buying a home. You don't want to buy a fixer-upper unless you can do the fixing up. You want to get a mortgage that for the shortest amount of time you can, because a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, you're going to pay for that house maybe 3 times in those 30 years.
Yeah.
In the interest rates.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So real estate's another area. Well, if I think of we think of Donald Trump, he made a fortune in real estate.
That was his big thing, real estate, yeah.
Sam Walton made a fortune with a company, Walmart.
Right. Yeah.
So, whatever you're good at.
Yeah.
I have a son-in-law that does real estate, and he does very well.
Yeah.
So it's, like I said, it's not just all the stock market. We have other investments besides stocks and bonds. There's, of course, your savings account. So.
Let me ask you about our motivation as Christians, when it comes to building up material things, building up wealth. What's our motivation as Christians for doing that? How do you look at that?
My first, you know this because I've told you this, God gives us 100%.
Yeah.
We owe him the tithe that he asks. And so I've been a tither for most of my life. And I think that money is just a vehicle. It's something there for us to use, obviously to meet our needs, but it's also there to meet the needs of others.
Okay, so it's about meeting needs.
Yes, I believe in charity.
Yeah, a vehicle for meeting needs.
Yes.
Ours and others. Yeah, I think that's a really concise way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me, what are some mistakes that people make when it comes to investing? Where do people get off track?
They get off track when a friend tells them that this is a good deal and they really haven't looked at it and they haven't studied it. I had a son-in-law, and the former son-in-law, and he told me about this deal that his parents were investing in out in Las Vegas. And it was a man that was doing office complexes, and it was a REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust, REIT.
Okay.
And he said they're paying 13% interest. And about that time, interest was around 6%. And I said, somebody paying 13% interest, that sounds kind of risky to me. And I said, and they're not always going to pay that 13%, it's going to come down over time. And he said, So I said, well, I'll invest with it. But there were 2 ways of investing with him, and I put half of what I invested so that every month I got a return on it.
Okay.
And the other half was going to be sitting there for 10 years or longer, and then you get the lump sum.
Got it.
Well, within 10 years, all the interest rate went down.
Okay.
And the guy basically almost went belly up.
Oh.
People couldn't withdraw their money from the funds.
Yeah.
And he ended up putting the money out on the he put it out on the stock market with an IPO, initial public offering.
Okay.
And so the day he put it on the market, I called my broker and said, please sell it.
You saw this was not going in a good direction.
Yeah, I wasn't going to stay with this guy anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't lose my shirt. I did lose some money in the deal, but because I had been getting those monthly payments, I had that.
Yeah, at least you had that.
But
Yeah.
anyways, so, sometimes people will tell you something good. One of my daughters told me about investing in a bond and hey, it paid really good interest, and when it came due, I got the money back, and
Yeah.
but it was a government entity.
Yeah. So a principle would be, if it sounds too good to be true, it might be.
It might not be.
It might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it sounds too good to be true, it might not be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the basics, though, before you can even begin to invest, is you have to learn how to save. And we talked about, wants and needs and
Yeah.
distinguishing between them.
Yeah.
And the other thing is becoming debt-free.
Okay.
Try to pay off your bills and try not to put things on credit cards that you can't pay off every month.
Sure. Let me ask you about that one too. Wants and needs. How do you distinguish the two? What's your criteria for deciding is this a want or a need?
Well, if the shoe's worn out, I need a new pair.
Okay.
I don't like shopping. I really, I grocery shop, but dragging me into a department store, that's the last place I want to go.
I'm with you. Yeah.
And people I said, clothes. I have clothes. To me, clothes are just something you have to wear to keep your body warm. It's not a fashion statement or what am I comfortable with? Today I'm not in my usual attire, which is blue jeans.
Okay. You dressed up for us today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I go into a store and I look at things and I say, oh, that's pretty, but I don't need it.
It doesn't have a lot of allure for you.
No, I'm not tempted by a lot of material things.
Okay. Okay. So for someone who's trying to decide, do I need this or do I want it? If it's something I use regularly and it's worn out, that might be a need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, here's an example. When I retired, I looked at everything that I was spending and what I was spending it on. And I realized that I really don't watch much television. I really watch the news and a couple programs. And so why am I paying for cable? And I stopped paying for cable and put an antenna on my house, and I get 60 stations, and I'm happy with it.
Okay, it works for you, and you're saving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I look at things, is this costing me $10 a month? Okay, now that's costing me $120 a year. And then in 10 years, I multiply. Okay, how much is this costing me over time? I don't look at it as how much as it is today.
Because today it's, I can do, $10 a month, what's the big deal?
Right.
But then when you play it out over time,
right,
you see, wow, that's a substantial amount that could be used for something else.
And so I realized, one of the guys that does financial planning lectures talked about Starbucks. You go to Starbucks every day, and I don't know how much coffee costs there because I only go there once or twice a year. Yeah. But I don't know, maybe it's $6 a cup, maybe it's $8. But if you go there every day and have a cup, say that it's $6 a day, at the end of the week you spend $30 on coffee. Well, you can buy a lot of coffee for $30 and brew it at home. Maybe it doesn't taste like Starbucks, but you can buy nice creamers and stuff and fancy it up if you want.
Sure.
So another thing before you can invest is you have to have an emergency fund.
Okay.
You need to have, it's advisable to have 6 months of income readily available to you, liquid. In other words, it needs to be in your savings account or in a CD where you can quickly get the money if you need it.
Okay.
Because you might be between jobs, there might be an illness, whatever, that you need a lot of money. And only 40% of the people are able to do that.
Really?
When I told you that at 55 I had to basically start over, obviously I didn't have an emergency fund anymore.
Okay.
And I wanted to invest.
Yeah.
Now that's a problem.
Okay, yeah. What'd you do?
So I bought disability insurance. It's very reasonably priced. So if I lost my job because I was sick, I would have insurance to cover me until I was able to go back to work again or get Social Security disability.
And that was because you didn't have an emergency fund?
That's right.
That was a way to cover that possibility?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Insurance, another investment. Not necessarily a good investment if you're going to get a whole life policy and pay for it your whole life long. When you're young, you probably need term insurance, where the premiums are very low, and as you get older, it becomes very expensive, but it covers you through those years when you're raising a family and so on, and after a while, you'll have enough savings to cover burial expenses and things like that.
Okay.
And hopefully you've made your investments so that you're able to live off of them.
Sure. You know, I know that it's a big topic and we could really go fairly in depth on a number of areas. We're getting close to the end of our interview time, and I wanted to just ask you, when it comes to our audience, what encouragement would you give to our audience when it comes to investing?
I think this lady's story is a big encouragement.
Yeah.
And that it's not impossible. You just have to be disciplined and set your mind on looking at where you can save and then invest it wisely.
Okay.
There are risks in the stock market. If you're afraid you're going to lose your shirt, maybe the market's not the place to be, because when the market drops, it's going to be real tempting to sell, and that's the worst time to sell.
Oh.
That's the best time to buy, but most people miss it. And you buy it when the stock is low, and of course you sell it when it's high.
So you have to have a stomach for it.
Yeah, you can't say, oh my, I lost bukus of money today, because 3 days from now, it might all be back.
You got to ride it out if you can.
You ride it out.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, so it's, and this lady, as you saw, she invested in companies and she wrote it out too.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
And don't buy risky investments. One of the things you look at is before I buy, I look at the price to earnings. How much is it selling for and what's the company earning, which gives you the earnings per share.
Yeah.
And I look at those things and, other things involved with the company before I want to buy it. And
yeah. Makes me think of Jesus and his words about before you build a tower, count the costs.
Yeah.
Know what you're getting into first.
And one thing I would avoid is annuities.
Okay.
I had an annuity and I sold it a long time ago. The problem with annuities is that when I started working as a nurse, I made $350 a month.
Okay.
Okay. We know that nurses don't make $350 a month today. Okay. So that annuity, when you retire, you're really at the highest income of your life.
Right.
And now it's going to add more income to your life and throw you into a higher tax bracket.
Oh, okay.
So I just don't see and the same thing happens to you with an IRA, a traditional IRA. When you reach 70 years old, it used to be 72, now it's 70, you get told you have to draw so much out of your IRA.
Oh, okay.
And I forgot to tell you, there's other ways of an easy way to save money is if your employer has a plan like a 401k and they say, we're going to give you 2%, by all means match it. Put another 2% in. Because they'll if you don't, they'll tell you, if you put in 2%, we'll put in 2%.
Sure.
And some of your employers will let you put in even more. And I did that. It was the easy way. It was right out of my paycheck.
Okay, so take the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that was, and then I found a financial advisor, and he helped. I learned a whole lot from him.
Oh, well, I've learned a whole lot from you, and I want to thank you for this conversation. And I know that our audience has probably gained some new insights as well. So thank you very much for doing this for the benefit of all who've been listening.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
And thank you so much for watching and listening to the Shepherd Podcast. I know that you probably learned some new things, or maybe even had some things you knew reinforced. And so I'd like to invite you to continue to join us on the Shepherd Podcast for future episodes, or even go backwards and watch some of our previous episodes, because we've got a lot of great people here at Shepherd to share with you. Until next time, the Lord's blessings to you. May He keep you healthy and safe and strong, and the peace of the Lord be with you today.